So, on my latest adventure in painting here, I decided to pull out some of my old Reaper Bones miniatures that I had gotten from the first two, or actually three, Kickstarters, and give it another shot. I had stuck most of these miniatures in a closet in boxes because I had a hard time wrapping my head around how the Bones miniatures actually paint. My first foray into trying to paint Bones miniatures involved me priming them, finding out they were sticky, doing research on what primer to use, and then realizing that, like on the Kickstarter, it says you just use paint right out of the bottle. And I ended up not liking the way the first miniature I painted turned out. So I just stuck them in the corner and never touched them again, except for occasionally to use them on the table as they were. So for this video, I decided to just start over again, try again, give it another shot, and maybe, make some headway. And I have to say, honestly, I'm kind of happy with the way they turned out. Normally, I will sit and try and make a project as detailed and as nice as I can. But with these guys, I was not looking to, as I've said before, not looking to win any golden demons or anything like that. I just decided to throw some paint on it and see how it turns out. So for each of the miniatures that I'm demonstrating here, I actually used usually 3 paints. For instance, on the troll here, I used the Reaper's Rotting Wood, and I used the Jungle Mist, which is also Reaper, and Balathean Chitin, which is Reaper as well. So on all of these, except for a couple of the metallics, I used all Reaper paints. And honestly, they turned out quite well. On all of them also, I did wash them as well. Because, obviously, if you're going to paint something like this and throw a bunch of paints on it, a wash does, kind of bring out the details. So I sort of went a little bit nuts, and I painted a bunch of these miniatures all at once. And I have to say, after giving it another shot, I'm kind of liking it. So as you can see, those are the 3 paints that I used. Of course, the wash that I used was Agrax Earthshade. I'm not quite fond of Reaper's washes or their metallics. They don't really work as well as some of the other metallics. I'm kind of fond of the Army Painter. So the next time I have to do do metallics on some of these miniatures, I'm going to give the Army Painter metallics a try. But as you can see here, I did just kind of a 2-tone on his belly and his face. I used the Jungle Mist. On the rest of him, I used the Rotting Wood. On his claws and his weapon, I used the Balathean Chitin. So I'm going to go ahead and let this run, and I'll be back in a moment. So after applying the wash, I went back onto the miniature with the same exact paints that I'd used before, the Jungle Mist, the Balathean Chitin, and the rotting wood, and I just put a bit of a highlight on all of the raised areas. I kind of dry brushed a little bit, and then I did, and for mostly for the bone stuff, I did kind of an edge highlight instead of a dry brush, just to bring out some of the details a little bit more. And then in the end, I ended up painting the base with a mix of grays and greens and browns. And I just kind of used everything that I already had on the palette and sort of like wet blended it together. And then I hit that with a wash, and I painted the base in noir black, which is, again, another Reaper color. So I guess technically, since I used the noir black, I used 4 colors on this, but I don't really count the base rim as part of that. So, you know. So as you can see here, these are a couple of the models that I had finished before I started painting the troll. I painted up this demon with Balathean chitin, Lone Star leather, and dragon red, as well as the Reaper honed steel. And then this guy, I used midnight black, and I used a progressive series of grays up to a very light gray. And the midnight black is actually, it's hard to see here, but it's a very deep kind of a dark blue. So all the recesses on the scorpion are a real blue color. Now for the worm, I used saddle brown and Balathean chitin and a wash, along with a darker brown for the base. And that's what I did for all of those guys. Now, for the flesh column, first thing I did, obviously, is I used a darker flesh shade, flesh color, Warrior Flesh by Reaper, and I pretty much used I used Wolf Gray for his little skirt thing that's going on, because it looks kind of like pitted stone, and then I used a Lead Belcher by Citadel for the metallic parts. The Citadel paints didn't adhere very well to the Reaper Mini, so I would recommend using Reaper paints for them. And also, I'm going to test out some of the Army Painter paints and see if the Army Painter paints do well for that, as well as the Reaper ones do. So here is where I've made my first mistake. The problem is I had run out of Reichland Flesh Shade. All I have left was a gloss that I used to make kind of a burnished gold when I'm doing like my Necrons or whatnot. So this ended up being way too dark, and it unfortunately it made it look a little strange. But I mean, you'll see the end result here in a moment. I mean, it's not like terrible, but it's not exactly my best work, so to speak. And plus, for these guys, I'm just trying to do like a quick tabletop paint job, something I can use in Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadow Deep, and maybe occasionally Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing too fancy, but you'll see what I mean here as I try and do highlights to kind of bring it back. So once again here I lost my highlighting footage due to my camera turning off, but as you can see, I went back over it with the warrior flesh. It looks a little strange, but I mean, this is supposed to be a flesh golem, so you know, maybe the flesh is a little pallid. I also went around and I painted a couple of more models. I used, again, for these guys, for the winged guy there, I used forest, the rotten wood, and there was a forest green, I believe, along with a darker kind of a leather brown color. And then I hit it with a wash. I used Brains Pink and Balathean Chitin for the little brain thing. This guy that I'm going to use is a Warpound in Stargrave. I kind of did some blending of pinks and blues and purples and then Balathean Chitin. And then later on, I went back and hit it with a Nightshade wash. The Gorgon, I used Balathean Chitin, and I also had to use Lead Belcher because, like I said, I'd run out of the Reaper metallics. It turned out okay. And as you can see, here is a shot of the miniatures that I did for this video, and in various stages of being done. I still need to go back and do some edge highlights and some dry brushing on some of them, but it turned out pretty good. So if you've enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.